I'm Shay Oliver. Welcome to the Priority Paradigm. I'm sharing stories of amazing people who've made radical changes in their life for something more important. Today, I'm joined by Jayson, Sime, and he has a very awesome story to share with us. So without further ado, Jayson, take it away.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it being here today. So a little bit about myself. This one to share my story. So I grew up in a single home, let me just restart actually. I grew up, my mom was a single mother of 6 kids. She raised us on our own at a very early age. My parents got divorced. And that when my parents got divorced, that really sort of had our family sort of nucleus put us into sort of a tailspin. We actually spent a brief time living in an abandoned women's shelter. We were homeless for a little period of time. And I always describe my childhood one of survival and very chaotic, just trying to get day by day. No real thinking in terms of long-term planning or what I wanted for my future. It was really about, how do we get through this day, and, how am I dealing with the environmental stresses that were put on me, not only in the home, but also what I was dealing with in school. I was diagnosed at an early age being dyslexic. And so, you had the combination of, being someone that was slower to learning because of my disability, being dyslexic and getting picked on. Couple that with my home environment, and it led to a lot of outbursts for me of where to take those emotions. So I got quickly labeled a classic troublemaker, got into a lot of fights growing up, partly because of my own not understanding, just raw emotions and with the frustrations that I was dealing with. So I went through a very I would say troubling times as a teenager. And, you're at a young age, you're also going, hey, I know has to be a better way and better opportunities for me. And what I had thought and what had been, the curriculum at the time was go to college, right? Go to college to get a better step up in life. And so I approached my guidance counselor in high school at the time. And he said, when I asked him about college, or I asked him how to do it, he said, well, college is not really for people like you, Jayson. You should sort of find a job and, work your way up the ladder was his advice. And I mean, he was taking all the labels and the trouble that I had been getting into, and the fact that I was barely going to graduate high school itself, and trying to, guide me, I think, to the best of his ability. It was crap advice, because I really needed someone that was more of like an adult mentor, like a figure to help me guide me, because I had no idea what to do. So I found out that I could go to my local community college, and that if you went to your community college, you wouldn't have to worry about taking the SAT, because I took the SAT and I failed it. And because I was slow at taking the test, that I didn't finish it. So I didn't get the required score to then get me into a major university. So I realized that, okay, community college, you go there, and then I can use the credits and then transfer to a major university. And so
Sure.
That's what I ended up doing. It took me roughly 5 years to graduate from college itself. But, through that process, it really taught me another, lifelong lesson about, sticking with something that then, if you stick with it long enough, that you can see success, knowing that you're going to have challenges and roadblocks along the way. But I was committed at that point to try to make my life better from where I currently had grown up.
Sure.
What I came to find out that, when I went to college, I was really passionate, like I still am here today. It's why we're having this conversation about helping others. I've always, since I've struggled as a young boy, I've seen my great role model, my mom. I've always been about giving back and how I can help others that are at a disadvantage or just need help figuring out life. And so I thought that one of the best ways would be a teacher. And because I had some really good teachers in high school that actually did believe in me, even though I was labeled a troublemaker, but they actually said very encouraging words, to me that at that time were very touching to my heart. And so I thought, you know what, teachers can really have a profound impact. So I
Absolutely.
went to the University of Northern Iowa to become a teacher. But then one of the amazing things happens in life is that after what at the time was the 2000 election, I was very fired up about what happened in the Supreme Court. I won't go into the politics of that, but just to say that I was passionate about that issue. And so I went to my professor at the time and I was complaining about, hey, I had voted for Al Gore. I was like, what else could I do? And he said, well, Jayson, you could have done more. I was like, what are you talking about? I could have done more. He was like a great college professor. And I was like, no, I voted for him. He's like, well, you didn't do enough. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you can volunteer in a campaign. You could have door knocked. You could have made phone calls. You could have passed out flyers. You could have been involved with a local chapter on college. And that I was like, whoa, I had no idea, right, in terms of how campaigns. So he, at the time, handed me an opportunity to go door knocking that summer in Iowa. And I used that opportunity as a summer internship where I knocked on doors for the Iowa Democratic Party throughout the state. And it really lit a passion because when you're talking to someone at their door, you get to hear issues that they care about in a way that many people will never have the chance to from a variety of people. And so it really made me passionate about particularly health and healthcare because I didn't have healthcare insurance growing up, and it caused a lot of issues moving into my early years as an adult. So I was passionate about that issue. So I joined and started working on political campaigns because I thought the best way that then at the time, I was like, well, teacher, one thing, but now if I elect people that I think have a certain value that I want to help and make change, I think that is a good way to affect people. And so I got involved in political campaigns. But what I soon realized was that my passion for wanting to help others ultimately ended up hurting myself. And the reason is because I was all about surviving and fighting. And in some ways that is very good on a campaign because it's long hours, it's stressful. And if you can adapt to a bunch of different changing environments and pressure and not having, say, your basic needs met, you can do a lot because campaigns at times are very much like that. You're on the road, you're traveling, you're irregular, the pressures. And so I found out I was pretty good at campaigns itself because of somewhat of my childhood, but I also had no clear way of dealing with the stress, the anxiety, the pressures that came with the job. So I became, a heavy smoker, heavy drinker. And after one of the campaigns, I had a bout of depression and anxiety, and I went to see a psychiatrist at the time, and he prescribed me an antidepressant, which I took, and it helped, right? It helped bridge the gap in the short term. But then I continued on taking it for 5 years. And I thought that was the only way that I could manage my stress and anxiety. So I figured with each campaign, I was like, oh, maybe I just take a couple more per day without ever having the guidance of the doctor that first prescribed me. And that was my part of my coping mechanism. And I didn't share that with anyone at the time, not my close friends, not my family, because I was somewhat also ashamed that I was sort of climbing up this ladder of success in terms of work I was doing, but I was also using, which is very, it's very good. People need prescriptions, right? I'm not saying anything against that. The way I was using it for myself, not with a doctor's supervision, wasn't good. And I was combining that with heavily drinking. And so no, not a good combination, right? Not when you start drinking at 5 o'clock at your desk either, right? Sometimes. So I took a job, moved out to Las Vegas, and it was a really big job at the time. It was to oversee their caucus, their presidential nominating process early in 2007 and 2008. And it was an exciting opportunity. And have you seen the movie Leaving Las Vegas?
Oh, yeah.
The classic Nicolas Cage character where folks that aren't familiar, Nicolas Cage, he loses his job, he gets fired, And he basically, his mission is to move to Las Vegas to then drink himself to death. That was his solution. And I bring that up because I was excited about taking this big opportunity and big chance in my career to move to Las Vegas. But in the back of my mind, I had this character, Nicolas Cage, because I thought I was literally going to move to Las Vegas and lose control, become an alcoholic. I wasn't sure what was going to happen to me, but that was a fear that was real to me at the time, and it was echoed by my friend when I was moving out there. And I stopped and I saw her in Denver, and she goes, "Jayson, what if you become a heroin addict?" And I'm like, "Jeez." Now, she's joking, but when someone jokes about, she didn't say, what if you start smoking cigarettes more? She went to that extreme. Exactly. And so that was another thing. I'm like, wow, this is how people are actually viewing me. Like the out of control, that I could go there and become a heroin addict. And so I moved to Las Vegas, and one of the craziest things happened. It was in the fall of 2007. I would be complaining about the stress and the pressures, and there was a woman I was dating at the time, and she was like, "Hey, why don't you try this hot yoga with me?" And I'm like, no, I don't have the time to do that. And she's like, no, it's good. She's like, it's Vegas. Everything's 24 hours. So my excuse, right? My excuse of I don't have time wouldn't play well. So I did my first yoga, I think at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. at night after I worked all day, right? And I just got demolished. And I mean, demolished meaning it was hot. I was rolling around in my mat sideways. I couldn't do the postures. I had no idea that it was going to be an hour and a half. I thought it'd be 1 hour. And so when it was an hour and a half, I was really shocked.
Yeah.
And after that, my body felt so good, and it was like lit full of energy that I was singing. I was like full of energy, and I was like, wow, the suffering and what occurred in the yoga room, right? Because my body hadn't felt anything like that in such a time, in terms of actually just being in touch with like some movement, some stretching, some sweating, that the contrast from the unhealthy, like the drinking, smoking at the desk, that was like so big that I knew I was onto something. So I started to take 1 or 2 classes a week. And if I did 1 or 2 a week, I would tell you, Jay, I would tell everyone that, like, oh yeah, I did yoga, right? I became a big fan. And what I realized is that it started to bring energy. I started to make better food choices. I realized that my stress and my anxiety, the depression started to come down too. Mm-hmm. And so I continued to practice. And over that time, I eventually realized that I could stop taking the the medicine I was using for anxiety and some of that. And, with the choice that I'm making with my own self-care, that I could actually manage it through my yoga, eating better, and some of the other self-care outlets that I had figured out at the time. And with that, I decided, you know what? Political campaigns, issue campaigns have been great, but what if I've always wanted to be a teacher? Why not become a yoga teacher? So I did that. I actually, 2011, I became a yoga teacher. For a small time, I managed the yoga studio, and then I spent about a year traveling around the world teaching yoga. And it was through that experience that, a couple of other things happened. One is you take a break from working on very stressful, political campaigns, and also stepping away from just America, how we operate, what is our lifestyles, what are some of the norms, the social culture. And it allowed me to see things in such a different light, along with seeing other people and other cultures, and getting to really go into their homes and how they deal with pressures and families, and how they eat. And so I really used that time to have a lot of self-reflection. And when I arrived back in the United States in 2013, there was a couple of things that were very apparent. One, I still care very deeply about, I would say, politics, the issues, like what affects us as a country. And particularly if I live like I do in Colorado, I want to be involved. It doesn't have to be directly involved in, say, what people think traditional campaigns. I want to be involved in making the place better for all of us that lived here in Colorado and the country. And so I got back involved. But the other thing that was very apparent to me is that people that work on stressful jobs, whether it is on a political campaign or you work for a nonprofit or you're a lawyer or you're a startup, they have to do better at putting a prioritization on the self-care of themselves. And we've been told all these false narratives and stories that you can sleep when you're dead and you can work all these hours, when reality is you need to put prioritization of how you take care of yourself and make that a daily mantra. And so since being back in the United States, I've been really an advocate of and learning myself, going back to school at Nutrition Therapy Institute, going to a bunch of different seminars, tools, trainings, to figure out, okay, how do we take care of ourselves and what are some of the tools and tactics we can use daily that then make us better equipped to deal with some of the pressure, the environment, the family, that we have to go on about our lives in today's current society. And so for the past few years, I've been working, I still was doing political campaigns, but I was at the same time, you'd hear Jayson doing this, and I'd be like, Jayson talking about self-care, how we do the work. We can do this more mindfully. And then last year, or over a year now, I opened my own business called Right to Shine, as the name says, and putting the focus into the individuals on their ability to bring their best self forward, not only at work, but also at home. And been leading trainings and seminars around the country for both nonprofits and corporations on self-care, and then also coaching people on making their own transformation from my own experiences that I have learned. And so that's the very brief, with me leaving out some stories here and there and some big pieces like the ultra running piece, but that's.
Oh, you're an ultra runner.
What's that?
You're an ultra runner too, huh?
Yes.
Very cool. Very cool. So, what an awesome story. Let's jump back just to one of the things that you said that I think is so true is that we have this narrative in the U.S. that you can sleep when you're dead. You can always take care of yourself tomorrow. How did we get here?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That is a very important question, and I'm not sure if it's because of the whole idea of the American dream and the American dream of working hard and, us coming over and escaping and how we actually migrated out west and right on the frontier. And then that carries into the modern workplace. Some of it is just not a narrative that's how you succeed in life, right? Is to work 24/7, and that's the best way. And look, I was a big mantra believer in that. Work hard, and that leads to ultimate success. I think that there is truth to, yes, you do have to work hard, but not at your own detrimental to your health.
Sure.
Or to you being able to do the work. And, I think that we haven't had enough real conversations about what it actually does. And I think to your point about how do we get there, we got here before we had a bunch of the science, where the science now is clearly trying to point us back in the direction of, that sleep thing, that exercise thing, stopping to get off your phone for a little bit. That might be sort of good for your overall well-being. And more importantly, also those around you may want to be around you a little bit more.
Right. Spot on. So let's shift all the way back to your school days. You said you had some teachers that were supportive of you, and then I'm guessing you had some that weren't.
Yep, exactly.
That you were labeled. How did you deal with that as a teenager? Those that were that were labeling you as the troublemaker, as the kid that wasn't going to succeed.
I think I used the classic, which so many, whether a sports figure or people that have been successful, you tell me that I can't do it, I'm going to show you that I can. So I think part of it is in my head, I said that. In the classroom, it came big outbursts, getting kicked out of school. But I was definitely driven by wanting to succeed and prove to people that I had the potential to be more than you're saying that I can be, which is a troublemaker. You told me I couldn't date your daughter. I'm not going to graduate from high school. College is not for me. I hang around the wrong crowd. You're stupid. You're slow. You hear that enough. At the same time, I had some early successes in terms of what I described before. For the first couple of years, I didn't win a wrestling match. I went, 2 years, I didn't run a wrestling match, and then you win a wrestling match, and then you become successful at that. And so I had some early things that were like, no, I know a formula for success. My formula may be different than my peers around me. They may be able to achieve it at a faster rate. Mm-hmm. But I know what the formula is for me, that if I can stick with it, if I can change my approach, that eventually I'm going to be successful. And so I knew that. And that's sort of been my mantra since I've been in, since high school.
Very cool. Very cool. So as you moved forward and headed into the political campaign arena and began to really go down that rabbit hole that is, very consuming, how did it feel as you plowed into that life? What were you experiencing inside as you got deeper and deeper? Not just the depression, but what was the hook that kept pulling you deeper?
That's a very good question. One, I would say there is sort of two. One, I was very driven by wanting to help people. And so, when you're hearing, you're at the door, you're talking to someone passionate about their issue and they care about your candidate, or they care about the issue that you care really about, and you can see that, this policy got passed and it impacted their lives. That hooked me in terms of being able to see some things that were really good. The other thing was, and I'll just be very, very candid and honest about the ego, is, in political campaigns, you have a real opportunity to move up and advance, pretty quickly, because if you're willing to stick with it, be flexible with your work, and if you're good working with people, you really have opportunities to move up and learn a bunch of skills that some of the jobs you'd be in there 3-4 years before you get to do some of the things that you could on campaigns. Sure. And also Iowa, Iowa is sort of the Harvard, if you want to think of it that way, of politics, because it all starts with the Iowa caucuses. So being there at that time allowed also some huge opportunities that you wouldn't have in other parts of the country. And that was also, right, the excitement. I used to joke that my early years of political campaigns was just extended years of college. It was like, we're working hard and we're partying hard. We're a bunch of young people that are passionate about the same issues. And I mean, why wouldn't you want to continue and keep that alive?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So as you're heading down this path, you started drinking, you started smoking heavier, and you then took the antidepressants. Can you pinpoint a place or an event that made you kind of start saying, wow, I'm heading down the wrong path for me?
Yeah, I think I can mention the two. The one that I always share is that in 2005, I had trained and ran for my first marathon. And at the time I was 75 pounds heavier than I am today. So right now I'm roughly 150. I trained and ran that marathon. I started at 215 and I lost maybe about 15 pounds. And after running it was the Baltimore Marathon, I was having these heart palpitations. So irregular, and I was like, whoa, I'm too young. I think I was 26 at the time. And so I went to see a cardiologist, and we do all the stress tests. I'm on the treadmill, I'm doing all these things. And the doctor afterwards, I had my shirt off and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm healthy. And the doctor stopped. He took his hand and he reached over and grabbed my stomach and was like, you ran a marathon with this? And was like, he shook my stomach. Oh my God. And you're like, whoa. And so it was with that awareness, that doctor, maybe he could have handled that situation, but he provided one very important thing. He provided awareness that I didn't have at the time. And he said, you may think you're healthy, but I'm telling you, you're overweight with the drinking that you do and the smoking you admitted to. I'm telling you, that is not a good lifestyle. So I asked him, I said, well, what weight do you think I should be down? Or where should I get? And he said, well, it'd be lucky if you got down to 170. And of course, I'm down to 150 now, but that created big awareness. And I think the second thing was in the 2004 presidential campaign, my health was so bad at times that, I won't go into some of the symptoms, but I literally remember like thinking in the back of my mind, if I'm feeling this way and I'm in my 20s, how would I ever sustain this into my 30s and 40s? And I couldn't even didn't seem like I would ever have a path if I continued on that trajectory. Now it took still a few more years for me to make those change, but was a lot of awareness.
So running up to that point in your life where that doctor shook your belly.
Yeah.
What excuses were you telling yourself to keep pushing forward with the American dream or whatever it was you were doing? What were you telling yourself? Why did you keep pushing before you finally began to change?
At the time, I think part of it was I was driven by wanting to succeed on the campaign, and I had the false narrative that I couldn't do both, that I couldn't take care of myself and work the hours and put up with the stress. And also at the time, I didn't have all the tools and the understanding of somewhat just basically how the body operates and what are good food choices too, right? And so that was some of the narrative that I was telling myself. And also I didn't want to face up to some of my real drinking, smoking issues that I had started when I was a teen that I was using to cope with stress, pressures, not feeling uncomfortable, all of those things that I was using rather than trying to address them by looking inside and looking for healthier alternatives.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. So as you moved forward, you end up in Sin City of all places,
yeah.
and discover yoga.
Yep.
Can you pinpoint the things about yoga, both on whatever level, that really brought you to a point of saying, I really do have to make a significant change?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I could go very deep in this answer very weird, but in a very very simple way that you hear a lot of yoga about the mind-body connection, and for me, it was more about here I am spending an hour and a half where I'm trying to follow along to a teacher talking about my body. So at first it was like just body awareness. Oh, I'm doing this stretch and it's this stretch and oh, I feel this afterwards. So the thing that kept me driving at first was like many people that become either addicts of running or not addicts, but that are like, oh, I love running or I love Pilates. I was driven by the feeling afterwards. And I was also driven by the education that was happening in the yoga room about the self-awareness of my body. And at the time I was practicing hot yoga where you're standing in front of a mirror. And so I also there was no escaping. Here's my body, looks pretty, doesn't look desirable to me at the time. I'm talking about my own, like what has happened to myself. I could see the wear and tear of the stress every day that I went into that room. I could also see though, every time and as weeks went by, that the pounds started to come off, that my skin started to look better. And that kept too driving me, that I started to make those connections, that the choices I made outside of the yoga room would also affect my practice in the yoga room, both positive and negative. And then I also realized, oh, I'm not as stressed. I'm a little bit more calmed down. And those things with practice, really started to add up. And then you have the other thing, which is when people start giving you positive feedback for a habit that you are doing that's good for you, you are then, of course, more driven to, of course, stay with it. Hey, Jayson, you look good. Your skin's good. Have you lost weight? How are you? Where's all your energy coming from? Oh, must be this yoga.
Very cool. So as you did the yoga and you began experiencing those things, tons was happening with your body and how you thought about yourself, thought about your body. What about your emotional state? Can you be more specific about what was happening kind of on the cognitive, emotional, spiritual, wherever? Because I think most people who do yoga experience a whole lot more than just what happens with their body.
That yes, and sometimes you're like, do you want to talk about that? So what I really there are many things with like the emotional state. I would say that one was calming of the mind, the pausing, which not racing from one thought to the next, but that is it okay if I'm just actually in here breathing? And those pauses, as simple as they may seem, then allowed me to self-reflect about how I interact with my environment, how I treat other people. And then as you have different instructors, they start saying little seeds of wisdom where you're like, oh, I am really not my thoughts. It is just a thought. I can let that go. I don't need to dwell or ruminate on what someone did to me. I can just actually listen to my breath for a few seconds and let that thought pass. You hear enough of that, you have enough practice, those start becoming what we would say the rewiring, right? Or the neuroplasticity of the brain with enough practice, enough conditioning that really started to change and alter some of the, I would say, limiting beliefs or ways that I had viewed the best way to operate within the work that I was doing, or with just in general with how we, are raised and upbringings in America.
Very cool. So how did the travel impact this? Because you decided to become a yoga instructor, and then you took off to experience things in other parts of the world. How did the travel and the people you interacted with internationally change you and change your perspective on things?
Yeah. The first thing with the travel was you take 13 months out of the country, and that will change your whole perspective because you're seeing just the pause alone. I was out of my own comfort zone in every daily interaction, from the grocery store to how I'm going to get around to being in Indonesia, Jakarta. When I first entered that yoga studio, I have many things that I know. I'm a white male in America, comes with a lot of privilege. In Jakarta, Indonesia, all of a sudden I'm in a yoga studio, right? All predominantly Muslim, right? Whole different environment, whole different culture that I had to then go, oh, I had to learn about the culture and understand. And what it really made me understand was, like, we think we have sometimes a lot of problems in America, and then you see other countries and other people, and how, particularly in Indonesia, it didn't matter. They were happy in all conditions, right? They were so pleasant and so happy, and I got to know so many different people that if we saw them in America, would think they're, big time struggles and troubles. They saw it as like no problem, and always had, great, like just a great perspective on their life situation. And so that was really important. The other thing is that we take a lot of things for granted. Being away, everything from, running water, and though having been out of the country and then having to figure out, oh, we need to get 5-gallon water containers, and that we can't use just the water out of the tap to wash our fruits and vegetables. You have to do it in all these different steps. Mm-hmm. Electricity may go out when you're cooking for a considerable amount of time. Those things made me have more gratitude, more grateful for everything that I had in America. And then lastly, when you're not hustling and bustling, it took a while for me to learn this lesson, is that it's okay to pause and do nothing. And, so many years, go, next thing, email, check. Even when I'm working out, then I'm going to this. That becoming a yoga teacher allowed me to then at times just sit out, relax, take a pause, look out the window, spend more time meditating. That then changed how I try to interact with my day, even if it's for a small little break.
Very cool. Very cool. So as you came back to the U.S. and got things rolling, you've decided to start your own company.
Yep.
What was the impetus for that?
I think the biggest thing was that I saw that when I got back, you have this experience where you did the work in one way, you leave, become a yoga teacher, you come back and you're working with people and they're still doing the work how you used to do, and that was not taking care of yourself. Not saying that folks don't, saying that their high degree a level is not put the prioritization of taking care of themselves. And so I thought there's a real opportunity, and there is a real need still in this country to put the prioritization in yourself. And that's everything from, the self-care of yourself to just the prioritization of making sure you do doctor's visits. I was at the dentist yesterday, making sure that you do if you have good healthcare insurance, you're doing twice a year, your annual cleanings. Some of those things we do not do, right? All of that. And so I wanted to be a voice, particularly within the nonprofits and the corporation, people that are at startups that are, have this culture of you can sleep when you're dead, 24/7. If I'm the latest one in the office, then I'm the one that's succeeding. To push back and say that there's a different way to do the work, and it's going to be better for your employer, and it's going to be better for you and then those around you.
Very cool. So you've come on quite a journey from it kind of sounds like the fanatic campaigner who was 100% all in, focused, everything was going to go in one direction, to a rather mellow, easygoing coach, speaker, instructor today. If you had the opportunity to go back to that young man in college and give him some advice, 2 questions. 1, would you do it? And 2, if you did it, what advice would you give him?
Yes, I would do it. Not sure I would hear the advice at the time, being in my my 120s. Is, I would try to, and I'm going to pause. I'm trying to think about how I would actually phrase it so that I might be listening, or I might be advice that I would take. But it'd be something where I would say that, Jim Rome, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but, basically said that, you only get one body to live in, so you better take care of it. And I think that sort of advice, in a big frame to myself, my young 20s, I would want advice like that was like that how the better that I start the journey of understanding how Jayson works with what's the best diet for me, what is the best way for exercise, and putting that, I think would have saved me
a lot of pain.
Years, a lot of pain, would it saved, for some of the suffering through some of the relationships, some of the issues that I dealt with. And that I think also it should be taught in, as a foundation in all of our schools. Right. And it's what I do for myself is not the same that what your audience is going to do for them. Right. That's part of the journey, but you have to start with somewhere, and you have to start taking steps. And sometimes that means, you take some advice here and go down that path. You're like, that doesn't really, that really doesn't work for me. Or this ultra running thing, that doesn't really work for me. But you know what? I actually do like yoga and I like biking. And so if I would have, a piece of advice would have been start taking care of yourself early and start that journey, knowing that small steps done frequently enough will add up. And that is the other piece, right? That you think you have to do it all. The diet, the exercise, the mindfulness, meditation, the getting off your phone. Just start somewhere. Take that first step.
I think you just answered my next question, because I know now you're working with people that actually want to change their lives, that actually want to focus on some of the things that you preach. What's the most important thing that you tell those people?
Yeah.
You may have just answered that.
No, I mean, I think, look, I said, take one, take one step. You want to take that one step. That's of course a good piece of advice. I think the other thing is the W, which a lot of great coaches, speakers, people have been around longer than Jayson, is why are you going to take that first step? People want to make a change and they'll never link up with enough reasons why. And so, if I'm coaching someone, I try to get a better understanding of why do they want to make that change, and then put emotion. And this is what Tony Robbins would say is link both positive and negative emotions to those reasons why. Mm-hmm. Have that clear understanding. You're more likely to stick with it. If you're just saying, I want to lose weight, but you have no reason why, it's not linked up to say your family, to your health, just your own appearance, you're not going to stick with it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. That's very cool. Well, Jayson, I really appreciate you spending all this time with me today.
Oh,
This has been wonderful. It's very interesting learning about you, and it's always fun to talk to somebody who's very passionate about what they do. And it's very interesting. You know, as I'm trying to look back, I'm trying to think, man, you were active in some campaigns where, you know, some huge things were happening in our country. And you probably helped pull some of us in the right direction, I believe. So thank you for what you did, even though there was a huge cost to you.
yeah.
It is appreciated. There are a lot of people that, you know, we really do appreciate people that get out and are passionate about what they believe in and try to make things better. So I just want to say thank you for doing that, both back then and with what you're doing today. I think it's awesome. So if somebody wants to know or learn more about you or get in touch with you, what are the best means or methods to do that?
Yeah, the best is through my website, Right to Shine. So it's RIJHTG. See, me being dyslexic, I can't even spell this morning.
Yeah, I hear you.
Just like it sounds. Right to Shine. You can find me on my website, and then I'm on Instagram, Right to Shine too. I will say that I'm not some of the folks that are on their Instagram daily. I try to practice what I preach. So I post, you know, occasionally I try to make content that makes sense and that's inspiring. And then you can, on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter where I send out updates.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I always wrap up with one question. And that question is, what question should I have asked you?
What question? That is a very good question. What question?
Oftentimes in people's stories, there's critical things that maybe I can't find or you haven't given an into, and it's something that's really important. So what question should I have asked you? And I'll take a win if I was perfect.
Yeah, no. I think the question that I forgot to, that's funny that I forgot to mention through that transition is that, you know, what else has yoga for my health then spurred like other health, or, you know, whatever has led me in it. So, you know, me doing the yoga eventually led me to running a few ultra marathons, one of which I ran a 100-miler, the Run Rabbit Run Race, which then REI created the film How to Run 100 Miles that was released earlier this year. So I never thought that starting off in hot yoga that you have the other thing that ultra running, which is sort of, again, this on the opposite spectrum. So
very, very cool. Well, Jayson, thank you so much for your time today. I have absolutely enjoyed talking with you today, and I look forward to seeing what you do in the future, and I will be in touch.
Thank you very, very much. I really, really appreciate this interview and more, you know, what you're doing, sharing stories, and then, you know, collecting all this. So can't wait to hear when the book comes out and to follow along this journey that you're doing.
Thank you very much.